Hi, welcome to the last lecture in the Section 2 lecture format. The topic is going to be after the fall of Rome. Now, as a kind of transitional lecture, this lecture will also appear as the first lecture in Section 3 of the course. And basically this very brief lecture is just going to basically kind of describe what the nature of or what the map looked like after the fall of Rome. And so if we take a look at the map, let me put this up here. If we take a look at the map of Rome, what we'll see is actually the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, remained consistent and under one single government. It was unified by both culture and a political system. But what we see in the Western Roman Empire is we actually see the rise of many separate Germanic-based governments. We see the kingdom of the Goths, we see the kingdom of the Vandals, we see the kingdom of the Franks, we see the kingdom of the Angles and the Saxons, otherwise known as Anglo-Saxon England. Basically what we see, or what we have happening, is we have the emergence of subsequent successor states of Rome, if you will. And what these states all tried to accomplish was the recreation of the stability and power of the Roman Empire in the European world. However, they would, for different reasons, almost all of them would fail in that goal. The first one we're going to look at is particularly in Italy itself, and it is the so-called Ostrogothic state. Now, as I mentioned in the lecture on Christianity, one of the primary issues of the Germans is if they came into the Roman Empire already Christianized or converts to Christianity, almost all of them, in fact, all of them were in fact converted by the heretical strain of Christianity known as the Arianists. And because of that, this difference in religion would set up a pretty large stumbling block in reestablishing that control. Now, if you remember at the end of the Roman lecture, I mentioned how the Roman Catholic Church moved into a position of power. And because of the status of these German invaders as being heretics, the Roman Catholic Church refused to work with them. In fact, the one group that the Roman Catholic Church did work with, which was ultimately the most successful out of all of these German groups, was a group of Germans that had not converted to Christianity at all, who were the Franks. And over time, through the actions of the Christian church, the Roman Catholic Church, the Franks did convert to Christianity, but they converted to what is called Orthodox Christianity, and they wound up achieving a solidification of and stability of European society, one that was extremely stable, lasting from the 600s and 700s AD all the way up to the French Revolution in 1848. So over 1,000 years of close relationship between the kings of France and the Roman Catholic Church. Now, for Italy, in terms of the immediate successor state, we have the so-called Ostrogothic state under the king of Theodoric the Great. However, because of cultural differences, religious differences, as well as linguistic differences, Theodoric was never able to establish a stabilized political system. One of the big causes of this, as you can see here, was a difference in terms of law. The Germans, or the Gothic law code, was based on this idea that if you killed someone, you had to pay what was called the weregild, or in English, the mangold. You had to pay the cost for that person's life. But if you did pay that cost, then it wasn't a crime. You basically paid your fine and moved on. Now, conversely, under Roman law, killing someone for no reason was considered murder, and that required a state-driven punishment. And so this example of Gothic law versus Roman law is only one example of the cultural, linguistic, and societal differences that kept the Germans in Italy from creating a viable state. Conversely, if we look at the one success story of this period, we look at the Franks, or as we call it today, France. The dynasty of kings that assumed control of France were called the Merovingians. And their king, by the name of Clovis, actually converted to Roman Catholicism. And because of that, as well as a desire and help from the Christian church in kind of creating a unified society, the Merovingians under Clovis and later kings were able to create a stable government. Now, over time, unfortunately for the Merovingians, they made bad decisions that ultimately resulted in the rise of a dominant opposing family known as the Carolingians. Over time, a situation developed where the Merovingians increasingly did less and assumed less responsibility and less action as kings, known as in French, the roi faisant, which means that they were the lazy kings. They didn't do their job. They basically contracted their job out to other nobles, in this case, the family of the Carolingians, which ultimately led to the replacement of the Merovingian kings by the Carolingians. But as a state, that change did not change or basically cause a failure of the government. It was a transition, not a collapse. And because of that, the Carolingians were able to basically inherit a rich state from the Merovingians and push that state to be more successful, more stable, and more dominant. Last but not least, we have several other states created. A German state, a German state was stated in Spain. It lasted for about 100 years, but ultimately failed due to internal and external pressure. There was also a Vandal state in North Africa, which was created and lasted for about 30 years, but ultimately again failed. And in the case of both Britain and Ireland, Ireland was converted to Christianity by a British slave by the name of Patrick, otherwise known as Saint Patrick. But pretty much after the invasion of the Angles and the Saxons, England itself stopped being Christian and would ultimately become a Germanic kingdom separate from Europe. And as a result, it was fairly successful in terms of maintaining its identity for about 500 years. But it was completely separate and cut off from the rest of European culture or European society. It would be eventually reconverted to Christianity in the 600s and ultimately would assume and become part of the European world again by about the year 800 or 900. Now, what does that mean for our medieval period? Well, other than the Franks, we have a very unstable political system, which would give rise to rival kind of internal governments, very regionalized governments, which would ultimately force a change and produce a system of government that we call feudalism, which would dominate and kind of influence European history and kind of lock it in place and keep it kind of stagnant for about 400 years. But that's something that we'll leave off to section 3. There'll be a series of lectures kind of talking about the Middle Ages and the rise of feudalism and how that all played out. This is just kind of a transitionary lecture, so I hope it's been informative, and I look forward to seeing you again in later lectures. Thank you.